Tucker had posed a question to Ted Cruz, namely, are the Jews of today the descendants of the Jews of the Bible? Interesting question. The film, by the way, tackles some of this, but I decided I'm going to do a one-on-one with Netanyahu. And since Tucker specifically mentioned like Netanyahu's Jews, I'm like, all right, I'm going to put it to Netanyahu. Perfectly legitimate thing to do. Netanyahu does an elegant sort of dunk on Tucker. And I'm about to post a clip on social media of Netanyahu's comment. So I think as a courtesy, I'm going to send it to Tucker because I don't want him to feel like ambushed. It's his question. I'm putting it to the Israeli prime minister. I texted Tucker. Tucker sends me back an extremely annoyed text, basically accusing me of suggesting he's an anti-Semite. I go, Tucker, I never said you're an anti-Semite. I'm very careful about making that kind of allegation. Tucker doesn't even purport to be knowledgeable about anything, right? So as a result, what Tucker says is, I will develop a ventriloquist style. I have strong opinions, but I don't want to defend any of them. So I will set up a structure in which I bring in sources, often rather dubious sources, people you've never heard of. You know, the nun with the mustache, some disgraced academic. And what I'll do is I will ask sort of leading questions that in which is embedded an answer, my answer, but framed as a question. You then will blurt out the obvious implications of the question, giving me the answer I expected, but I will pretend to be thunderstruck by it. It's an epiphany. It's a new revelation. People have been suppressing this kind of thinking for decades. So this is a shtick. It's a different shtick than Candace. Candace's shtick is the Candace Intelligence Agency. I'm like the world's greatest detective. You know, I'm the Pink Panther of my time. I'm deputizing all my viewers also to be detectives. Feed me information. We're going to crack the case. So to me, this is like an intellectual embarrassment because all my life I've been an iconoclast. I will take on ideas and I will try to dismantle them, but not in this way. My ideas are things like this. The Dixiecrats all became Republicans. And my strategy of challenging that is I go make an inventory of the 200 Dixiecrats. I put them up on a movie screen and I say, all right, I'm now going to show you through a movement of the mouse which of these 200 Dixiecrats became Republicans? Answer 2. So did the Dixiecrats as a group become Republicans? No. There's the empirical evidence right there on the screen. You can check it out, for yourself. So when I see this almost parody of investigation, parody of scholarship, it's very unnerving. Now, for young people, just as you said, there is a susceptibility to all this, and also there's no easy check on it. Like these days, if you say, "Hey, Megyn Kelly, hey, Patrick Bet-David, why don't you invite Tucker and me to have this out? We'll do it in a very civil way, but we'll get to the bottom of it." Even they become very skittish because everybody, it seems to me at least, is being strategic about how they approach all of this. In other words, what's in it for me? How am I going to be positioned to be, as opposed to saying, hey, this would be great. Wouldn't people love to sort of eavesdrop in on all this? And now it can be done so easily online. So even though the opportunities are much greater, the actual debate, as you know. I first noticed that the left didn't want to debate, but I'm finding that the right really doesn't either. Well, give you a small example. I did a debate online with Nick Fuentes, partly because he was prancing around telling all his viewers and an increasingly large group of people, everybody's scared of me. I'm alpha male. He's like, Ben Shapiro's scared of me. He's like, Charlie Kirk's scared of me. Everyone's scared of him. So I'm like, I'm not scared of you. So I did this debate. It went very well. In fact, a lot of his young listeners were like, who is this guy? And like, Nick is not doing as well as we had hoped and so on, all this stuff. But my point is, as soon as I did that, I got a text from Charlie Kirk. Dinesh, why? The basic idea was you should not debate. And you certainly shouldn't debate Nick Fuentes, and you shouldn't give him any platforming or any recognition. So again, Charlie was approaching it strategically, like I'm the head of an organization, a youth organization. I don't want Nick Fuentes to be sort of poaching on so this is the prevailing mentality among the new punditocracy. Tucker and Candace jumped into this arena with such a splash that all the conservative pundits were like, I don't want to take that on because Candace is extremely vindictive. Tucker has a huge following. This will immediately put me on the wrong side with a lot of my own followers. I might lose followers. And as soon as I stepped into this arena, I basically started getting messages to that effect. Well, Dinesh, you make movies for the mainstream of the right of center audience. You realize there are a lot of young people who might start, hating you or start calling you names, which by the way has happened, but it's just foreign to my own mentality. I don't even think like that.
Because when you were looking at the podcast charts, I think it was Konstantin who pointed it out to me, like number 1 and number 2 on the conservative podcast charts is Tucker and it's Candace. And that is a pretty damning indictment on conservative political thought, isn't it?
Well, what it shows, I think, is that the type of people who listen to podcasts, and the type of people, for example, you find on X, are drawn to this kind of it's a certain type of political porn, isn't it? I mean, it's Candace puts out a salacious, incendiary allegation. It doesn't hold up, and over time it becomes obvious that it's stupid. But she then replaces it with another one. And it's a never-ending playing of these kind of nude cards, so to speak, on the table. And apparently there's a virtually endless fascination for them because it's a new card. It's like, it's not, okay, we've played the Brigitte Macron card, now we're on to the Who Killed Charlie Kirk card, and tomorrow it'll be something else. Now, when people said to me, well, Dinesh, but didn't you speak at Brexit? Didn't you and Tucker tour Australia last year, which is we did? I say to myself, look, my admiration for Candace and Tucker was developed on a completely different basis. Candace had stepped forward as like a young black woman taking on affirmative action, taking on DEI, basically speaking to young blacks about leaving the plantation, to use, her own rhetoric. And I'm like, that's fantastic. That needs to be done.
She's very good at it.
Very good at it. And no one else is doing it. And she's the perfect messenger. And so my admiration for Candace was based on that. Tucker, he was really good in COVID. He was really good on Fox, his very memorable and kind of witty monologues. He showed a lot of bravery, I think, in the way he handled the break with Fox. But what's happened is that, it's I don't mean to make light of it, but essentially you could say that Candace and Tucker have gone trans on us. They have transitioned into something completely different. And now we're being asked to sign off on them, even though it's not the same Candace, it's not the same Tucker. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get on this bandwagon. I admired you for other reasons, but you apparently have become a different person. I play by the old rules. So what happened was Tucker had posed a question to Ted Cruz, namely, are the Jews of today the descendants of the Jews of the Bible? Interesting question. The film, by the way, tackles some of this. But I decided I'm going to do a one-on-one with Netanyahu. And since Tucker specifically mentioned, Netanyahu's Jews, I'm like, all right, I'm going to put it to Netanyahu. Perfectly legitimate thing to do. Netanyahu does an elegant sort of dunk on Tucker. And I'm about to post a clip on social media of Netanyahu's comment. So I think, as a courtesy, I'm going to send it to Tucker because I don't want him to feel ambushed. It's his question. I'm putting it to the Israeli prime minister. I texted Tucker. Tucker sends me back an extremely annoyed text, basically accusing me of suggesting he's an anti-Semite. I go, Tucker, I never said you're an anti-Semite. I'm very careful about making that kind of allegation. To me, an anti-Semite is somebody who holds the Jews and only the Jews to a standard that they won't apply to anyone else. And if you do that consistently and systematically, then your motives are rightly suspect. But I didn't even say any of this. This is more the criterion spelled out in the film. But I just said, I'm not doing that, Tucker. And then he sends me some genetic study showing that the Jews of today are only 67% connected to the Jews of the Bible. And again, I'm thinking, first of all, would you do this with any other group? I mean, would you consider, for example, saying that blacks don't really come from Africa because let's do a genetic test on Whitney Houston, see what a percentage of black is and non-black? I mean, if you did it with any other group, there would be immediate outrage. And Tucker knows this. I mean, again, we're not talking about some goofball on social media. We're talking about a smart guy who's been around. I've known Tucker for probably 25 years. So this is a savvy guy. He does know what he's doing. And this is a little bit of why I hold him to a higher standard, is because I think he does know better. So, but he becomes very annoyed because I challenge this mode of sort of, you could call it genetic verification. I say, listen, of all the groups that have been dispersed to the ends of the earth, as far as I can see, the Jews have kept a tribal identity more than any other group. If you look at, say, you know, Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, the Jews don't intermarry. Shylock doesn't even want to go eat with the Christians. And when his daughter runs off with a Christian, he's outraged. I mean, this gives you a little window into how Jews as a group have preserved their Jewish identity, not to mention gone back to their ancestral homeland, revived the Hebrew language, and essentially recreated, at least to an observable degree to me, the world of the Bible. It's observable if you walk around Jerusalem. You feel like you're in the land of the Bible. And then I also, of course, became very interested in the biblical archaeology and all of that goes with it. But sort of Tucker and I have this break that, again, would normally be settled by saying, all right, well, look, this is a very interesting discussion. As far as I know, it's never happened. Let's do it on my show. But maybe, as you say, Tucker is like, why would I want to have an informed critic on my show? That might show me up. That might show that I am actually far less of an authority and the man in control or know what I'm talking about. I would much rather keep the structure I have, which is the ventriloquist structure of having essentially submissive guests who echo back to me what I want them to say. And I don't want to really veer too far from that.
Your film is about October 7th and Israel. Why do you think there has been this level of focus on Israel in Western political debate?
I think for young people, the young people already think, or at least a lot of them do, that this group of insiders or elites has its own racket going. And they care about everybody, like, except me. I, the ordinary American, the working class guy, I'm like the very bottom of their list.
Is that unfair, though, Dinesh? Is that an unfair assessment of the situation? When you look at the Rust Belt, when you look at comments like the deplorables, etc., when you've seen how societies, and particularly in the center of this country, have been allowed to go to seed, is that really an unfair criticism?
No. I'm actually stating it sympathetically. Yeah. I understand why people say those things, but what I'm saying is, now imagine the Pied Piper who comes along and goes, listen, the reason that you have this predicament is because this whole American structure, which has a lot of bad elements, it's got the police state, you know, it's got the cultural left, it's got academia, the media, Hollywood, but there is, in fact, a kind of super manipulator that is controlling all of these. And that's Israel, right? So it's almost like Israel is being presented as the master key. Now Tucker's backing off from some of this, because I noticed that in his most recent talk in Indiana, he goes, well, there are some disagreements in MAGA over foreign policy. I think we can all agree that America's interests should come first and that Netanyahu is a leader of a foreign country, as if that's just what we've been talking about. In reality, I think the sort of the poison is not about that. It's far worse. It's essentially putting the Jews as the master manipulators of the entire elite structure, and a lot of young people buy into that.
What's interesting about all of this is you have to be very, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but the word ignorant has a meaning, which is a lack of knowledge. You have to be very ignorant to think that in an alliance of the most powerful country in the world and a tiny country which is dependent on that country for its security, that relationship could be anything other than the powerful country getting its way 99% of the time. Like if a 25-year-old White House staffer comes over to Britain, he's talking to people way above his level, twice his age, and they're all sitting there taking orders because America is the world's hegemon and Britain isn't. And it's inevitably the same with any other country with which America is in a kind of relationship of some kind. America sets the terms, the other countries do what you want. So it's a very strange trick that's being played.
That is part of it. The part of it I don't understand is that even if you take the ignorant guy and you give him a very simple, coherent cure for his ignorance, he still resists. I'll give you an example. So I was on Matt Gates's podcast, and Matt Gates goes, well, you spend a lot of time in your movie, Dinesh, biblical archaeology. You're trying to show that the Jews have this ancient ancestral presence going back 2,000, 3,000 years ago. He goes, so what? He goes, the American Indians were here first. Does this mean we got to turn over the whole country to them? So I reply as follows. I said, well, Matt, as far as I know, if you look around the world, I only know 3 ways in which you can get the title deeds to a country, any country. First, you are the original inhabitant. And that's one basis for making a claim. The second, some sort of negotiation or treaty. Someone gave it to you as part of a deal that was made. And 3, conquest. I go, I don't know a single country in the world that didn't get its borders and its map out of one of these 3 ways. I go, in America, quite honestly, there's a bit of a dispute because the Native Americans were here first, so they get original inhabitancy, but the white man conquered it, so conquest goes to the white man, and so you could argue that there's at least some sort of a disputed title. I said, let's apply this logic to Israel. Number 1, the Jews were there first. They were the original inhabitants. Check. Number 2, the United Nations at the end of World War II, by treaty, basically, or by negotiation, says, all right, Jews, you can have this. Arabs, you can have this. The Arabs say no, but you have the check, the second box, a negotiation or treaty. And number 3, the Jews have fought multiple wars, 48, 67, 73, have held the land by conquest. So I go, I don't know a country in the world that has a stronger claim to title. Israel is checking all the boxes. Now, again, if someone is ignorant, they could go, well, that makes sense to me, or I can think of a 4th box, or but what I find is that if you say this, which seems to me very straightforwardly convincing, you make no headway. The person who is ignorant doubles down, and then they will start saying things like, who paid you $7,000? Right? And so what does that tell you? That tells you that they want to be in that pit.
There's another agenda going on.
Yeah, there's another agenda going on. They are emotionally committed to that ignorant position. They dig in.
And what's been very interesting to me is with the ceasefire, which Trump and lots of other countries negotiated, but Trump was at the forefront of it, particularly when it comes to the public element of it, and the return of the hostages, which is a fantastic achievement. We can all agree on that. But the fact that all of these people who seem to be banging the drum day in, day out, demanding a ceasefire in Gaza, which I think we're all sympathetic to, nobody wants to see the loss of innocent life. And you go, but you did not celebrate this in any shape or form. That betrays something very fundamental about your outlook.
That's an exact continuation of the point I'm making, that they will state an objection. We're concerned about the civilian losses of life. That stops, they go dead silent. Not only that, but Hamas now begins to drag people out in the open, break your legs by hammering your legs with a stone or shooting someone in the street. And remember, these are Palestinians. These are the very people that these groups on the left and on the right have professed to be motivated by. Anna Kasparian is like, whenever she goes on, on Piers Morgan, she's like inconsolable. She can't stop herself out of, professed concern for civilian life. And yet, suddenly, you find that she has nothing to say. And this is, I think, the low deceitfulness of our age. it's not that people say, you know what, I was wrong, or I'm relieved there's a ceasefire, or I made an error in this news article, I'm going to admit it. What they do is they go back and they stealth edit it, right? And it's as if to say, I never made the mistake. Go look right now. See, it's all right. Or what they do is they go dead silent. They wait for the issue to pass so they can reemerge sort of unchastened. And again, this is just dishonest from the point of view of scholarship, right? It's kind of like you published a paper, you made these claims, they're actually false. It's up to you to go, I got it wrong. Here's why I got it wrong, but I'm gonna fix it, and I'm not gonna make that mistake next. If you don't do that, the dishonesty becomes habitual.
And I'm glad that you use the word dishonesty, because when I look at the situation in Gaza dispassionately, there is no way forward for that situation to be solved until you get rid of Hamas. I think everybody can agree with that.
Most Middle Eastern countries agree.
Yeah. Until you get rid of Hamas, there is simply no way you are going to have peace in that region. But how do you get rid of them? Because they're not going to want to go off their own volition. They're not going to go, you know what, actually, we've still got 20,000 people, however many soldiers we've got. We're going to put down our weapons and we're all going to become organic vegan farmers. That is simply not a reality. So I guess the question is, how do you solve a problem like Hamas?
Let's fill out the problem a little bit more. Hamas does have a lot of civilian support and allies. Normal civilian families in Gaza have stashes of weapons. It's not entirely a case, even though I will say Hamas has human shields, and the picture that gives you is the Hamas guy like grabbing these civilians and sticking them in front, shoot, but the truth of it is there are a lot of civilians, maybe because they've been propagandized over 20 years, they shelter Hamas. They are willing human shields. You will have moms who say things like, I've given 2 sons to Allah, and you expect her to say, I've got 2 more, so I'm not ready to, but no, she means, I am ready to give 2 more. I'm going to give them all. So there is
And I also feel it's fair to say as well, Dinesh, so there are people going, if Hamas come in, point a gun at your head and go, you are going to stand here in front of, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do.
Yeah. I mean, look at how they're punishing dissidents now in the street. And then there you have a global jihadi movement that doesn't wake up actually sweating about the Palestinians, but does see Hamas as part of its global jihad. It's one tool, right? So they have their own reasons for keeping this festering. So even if Hamas decided, to dismantle the global jihadi operation, which has much wider ambitions, right? They want to infiltrate Australia and Canada and Europe and the United States. And that doesn't go away. So I'm very hopeful about what Trump has done, but I also very conscious of the magnitude of the task ahead.
It's 2025. America's debt is over $37 trillion, and the dollar just had its worst crash since 1973. That puts your savings and your family's future at risk. That's why we trust Alpha Omega Gold, a company that stands unapologetically with Israel and supports Stand Tall Israel. Visit ao.gold/stand to claim your free precious metals wayfinder guide, or call 1-855-426-4653 today. Protect your future before it's too late.